Tate Chronicles now transmitting.
Welcome to the Tate Chronicles on Healthcare Now Radio. And now, here's your host, Jim Tate.
Good day, citizens of the free world. From border to border, coast to coast, and to all the ships at sea, I bring you a warm welcome. This is your correspondent, Jim Tate, and thank you for tuning in today to the Tate Chronicles. Join me as we cut through the fog that exists at the leading edge of healthcare technology. My guest today is Damon Auer. Damon is the managing director for North America for Dedalus. Dedalus provides services and products to support a digitally enabled healthcare ecosystem. Their vision is promoting change in healthcare delivery from the episodic-centric approach to one more aligned with continuum of care. And I've had the pleasure of being on some roundtables talking about interoperability and with Damon. We've talked a few times. And Damon, welcome to the Tate Chronicles today.
Thanks, Jim. Glad to be here.
It's good to speak with you again. I would like to kick things off with a blog post I read recently on the Dedalus website by the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. George Matthew. Interesting title of that post, The Unbundled Provider. And it really focuses on the rapid change in healthcare that is no longer totally provider-based, but is shifting really rapidly more and more to a consumer-based model in healthcare services and data. So the first thing I'd like to ask you, Damon, is kind of based on this blog, how do you define the traditional provider model?
If you look back, Jim, at the last, I'd say 3 or 4 decades, we've gone through this, or we've all lived through this experience of IDNs, big IDNs consolidating ambulatory specialty care with acute care. So when we talk about large providers or anchor providers really in geography, when we think about value-based care and where things are likely to happen, traditionally, it's been centered around these large IDNs that combine all these different care disciplines into one entity. And I think we're starting to see, and maybe even going to see a faster decoupling, disentanglement of some of those ambulatory services from acute. And there's some really interesting reasons why that is.
Well, and so you're, over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen many hospital systems buy up ambulatory practices for any number of reasons. So are you saying that there's starting to be a decoupling of that in some way?
Yeah. We've been also watching this shift over the last decade in particular as our technology has gotten better and we've started to test some different payment models and bundling of services and shifting more and more of what used to require an acute setting for care for any of us to ambulatory settings. We're getting better at taking care of people remotely and from afar. And we have more and more tools to do that. And so what that is allowing us to do is empty more hospital beds and shift more of the actual care and recovery from interventions to alternative sites like my house, right? Or a retail care setting. And so it's and if you look at just a couple things that have happened in the last 60, 90 days, there's 2 big deals that we'll all be familiar with and have talked about probably ad nauseum at this point. But the One Medical deal with Amazon was done at 4 times revenue. And the Signify Health deal with CVS was done at 8 times revenue. Those are really, really inflated multiples for what is essentially a primary care business in One Medical, a truly consumer-centered primary care business in One Medical, and a growing alternative site ambulatory home care business in Signify Health. But if you just think about the financials of those deals, demonstrates that we are now beginning to value what happens in an ambulatory care setting in a very different way than we value what happens in an acute setting, right? Even just from a financial standpoint.
If you don't mind, I don't know all the details of that Amazon deal. What's that all about? What's Amazon doing?
So Amazon has announced an acquisition of One Medical. One Medical is a relatively new, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years. In fact, my family here in North Chicago, we use One Medical just because it's a very pleasant, truly consumer-centered experience. They make you feel like they know who you are, and we don't have to fill out the same forms over and over and over again. All these things that have sort of depersonalized care in an acute setting, and we've just been told for decades to just be patient and wait. Right. Is One Medical is an example of a new primary care business, primarily selling to large employers, but also payers of all shapes and sizes and different geographies. And what's interesting about One Medical is it's just a very different experience. It's a real modern consumer experience. And in fact, if you do a little research, which we have done, and look at the technology that One Medical uses to create that show me, you know me, and personalize the care experience for Damon or Jim or my family member, they didn't start with a built-to-bill electronic medical record like most of the rest of the provider industry. They started with a consumer relationship management system, and then added charting to that system over time. So there's a very intentional reason that the feeling we get when we get care at One Medical is very different, right? Because they talk to me like I'm a person, not a patient just sitting in a waiting room.
And so One Medical is a network of providers, correct?
Yep.
And it's ambulatory. Is it also inpatient as well as ambulatory surgical centers?
To my knowledge, it's all ambulatory, and I'm not deeply informed, Jim.
Sure.
On this one, so I don't want to overstep.
And yeah, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about Amazon, but I'm kind of interested in why they are doing this now. When they decided, because Amazon is such a big player in so many domains that there are a lot of opinions about them. Of course, they've grown large by their ability to deliver things. And when they wanted to get in the grocery business, they didn't start from the ground up. They went and bought Whole Foods, and then brought their added value with ability to return things you bought from Amazon to a Whole Foods. It almost sounds like this is the way they're getting into healthcare. They've picked One Medical, which already had a good system in place, and maybe are going to test the waters, so to speak, to see about going more than just on a regional basis.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Amazon's ginormous, right? So this deal, even at the 4x revenue multiple,
right,
which makes it kind of extraordinary, is it's a rounding error when we look at Amazon's overall revenue model. But to your point, Jim, the retail locations, grocery, right, locations that Amazon acquired with Whole Foods are very much being considered as a co-loco or co-location for care services, not dissimilar to some of the other retail services that we're seeing, right?
It's really fascinating, the change, and again, not having to build it from the ground up. Excuse me. Sometimes 1 and 1 can be 3 if you get the right synergy.
Yep. Yeah, it's really and the other thing I think that's driving this, or at least the early stages of this disentanglement of ambulatory from acute services. If you think about it, the way that any of us pay for healthcare has actually changed quite a bit in the last decade. We've all gotten more used to, and I think comfortable with, these high deductible insurance plans, right? Health plans.
Yes.
Essentially, we're paying for 80 or 90% of our ambulatory care anyway is coming out of our pocket in the form of these high deductible plans. And if you think about where the consumer experience in healthcare really lies, it doesn't lie in acute. We're lucky to be conscious when we're in a catastrophic acute situation, right? We could complain about the food or what's on TV, but that's about it. The lion's share of the experience that any of us will have in healthcare over our lifetime, 95% of it is in an ambulatory setting. So Amazon, in this case, very intentionally is buying a modern, consumer-centered ambulatory business where they can be part of the change in the consumer experience in the healthcare industry over the next couple of decades, right? I think that's the primary reason. And as we're thinking about this here at Dedalus, the question we constantly are asking ourselves is what is the healthcare industry landscape look like 2 years from now, 4 years from now in the US? And I think this is maybe the showing us that we're going to separate the consumer experience in care, and our whole reason for existence at Dedalus is to personalize care experiences for everyone, which is, I believe, the fastest path to health equity and has other benefits. But if it's true that we're going to start to see ambulatory services disentangle from acute, there's going to be ambulatory organizations that have brand new, truly consumer-centered technology needs over these next few years. So it just makes us think a little bit differently about how we can bring the software assets of the firm to some of these emerging consumer experience and care organizations in different parts of the country and the world.
Well, that's kind of, I'd like to have you speak a little more about that. Is Dedalus, who are your customers, and what are you doing to support this shift we've been talking about?
Yeah, we serve large provider customers like a lot of other healthcare software companies do today. But more often than not, in those large provider customers, we're really having an impact with our software on the consumer experience, regardless of what channel the interaction with a consumer and the provider occur in, whether that's I'm in my primary care physician's office for an annual checkup, or I'm visiting a specialist for a particular procedure or opinion. And so we're already seeing our software, the use cases and the value propositions in large providers are almost always targeted at specific cohorts of people in a population and geography that we can get really intimate with individuals in those cohorts, understand who those people are, what my goals and dreams and fears and habits and preferences and everything else are, right? All the things that can really have an impact on my experience of care, and use software to orchestrate care plans for individuals that are uniquely them for them. And we use the term whole person care with some frequency, and that sort of means different things to different people. But to us, it means everything we can think of, every service that we can orchestrate for your benefit over time to improve your health and well-being. So everything medical, behavioral, all the licensed care team members that can have an impact on your health and well-being, we can proactively coordinate and orchestrate. And I think that person-centered orchestration is going to be the high value discipline in a standalone ambulatory setting that's no longer entangled with acute.
Disentanglement.
Yep.
It seems like that brings value. There's a couple of things I've thought about as we've been discussing these topics, Damon. Sometimes change occurs slowly. Sometimes it's incredibly fast. And in the business side of healthcare, I just think of a couple of examples. Like not directly related to what you've been talking about, but just shows how quickly things can change. There's been a gigantic amount of money and startups invested in helping patients have their own personal health record and figuring out ways to get their data in there. And just so many startups. Microsoft had one, Google had one, everybody had one. They kind of threw in the towel, but there's still a lot of these companies trying to create a personal health record so people could aggregate their data, which is kind of complex how they actually get access to that data from numerous providers and stuff. But then along comes TEFCA, which you and I have talked about quite a bit, which is the network of networks. Been 6 years in the planning. They're just going to start flowing over it probably sometime next year, and hopefully it's going to be pretty widespread adoption. And in that case, a consumer will just need an app or something similar to an app that accesses the TEFCA network, and the data will flow. You don't have to go looking for it. You just have to access it as yourself. And so those businesses really changed quickly. And then just in the last couple of months, the change that's happening to hearing aid technology. Technology has always been there. It's gotten better and better. But since the FDA ruled that the people that really set the prices and control the distribution and prescriptions for hearing aids has disappeared. And so it's a much different market, and hearing aids are probably going to come down in price 50 to maybe 80%. I don't know if you've been seeing any ads about that yet.
Yeah, lots of ads, right?
I mean, anybody who was in that business of healthcare, taking care of hearing, who was making money off those devices, that market's gone. I'm sure Amazon will be selling them. Everybody's Apple, kind of everybody. So things can happen very quickly. And, there is a aspect that you talk about. So it'll be fascinating to hear your experience in the years ahead as the deal goes through with Amazon, how your healthcare provider network is able to maintain what you like about it. That would be the test.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see it play out for sure. But the good news, Jim, and even the hearing aid example is a great example of disentangling an old process that had half a dozen middlemen and distributors who controlled everything, right? And we were told to just be patient and wait until somebody in that closed network told you what hearing aid you could get and at what price, right?
Right.
And that's a great example of a seismic shift in that one little part of the industry in favor of the consumer, right? Like the ads are a little maddening in their frequency at this point.
Yes, I know.
But at the same time, we got to get the word out, right, to consumers that have a need that all of a sudden the market is a lot more transparent and a lot more accessible and a lot more focused on the end consumer of care, not all the middlemen,
absolutely,
and networks in between us.
That's true. To our audience, if you're just joining this episode, I'm Jim Tate, and on this episode of the Tate Chronicles, I'm speaking with my friend Damon Auer of Dedalus. Kind of going back to that example of hearing aids, same thing, but in managed care. We heard about it, we knew it was coming. The months and years pass. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like pudding that suddenly thickens. It goes from liquid to a semi-solid, at a very critical level, precise level. And it seems like we're seeing more and more of that. I guess that's really what you're describing as these the rapid shift in technology companies, healthcare technology companies being able to pivot to support the shift. Or they'll be left behind.
Yeah, I mean, the acceleration, just the pace of change feels like it's accelerating pretty dramatically. And I think this particular shift that we're talking about here, the decoupling of ambulatory from acute, is just a huge consumer benefit there. the transparency, the choice, our ability to make choices, informed choices about our own care in ambulatory environments is so much higher than in acute environments, right? And
absolutely.
And you think about the way that things get paid for, our high deductible health plans basically mean that me and my family are paying for our own ambulatory care anyway, right?
Yes.
And my insurance should be for catastrophic acute, just like my car insurance is for catastrophic situations. It doesn't pay for my oil changes or fill my gas tank. Why would we expect our health payer?
Damon, on the administrative side of everything, this push that there has to be supposedly transparency in hospital charges. And I say supposedly because I think that those rules have been passed and they're supposed to be doing it. And people say, yes, they are. And some people say, no, they're not really doing it. I don't know. But we're moving that direction where transparency in pricing and also no surprise billing, which is, you go in and you don't realize you may be in an in-network hospital for your surgery, but the anesthesiologist is not in network and you get a giant bill from that side. Those kind of non-consumer friendly processes, hopefully those are part of the administrative changes that actually support this too.
Yeah. That what a welcome change that will be, right? When we actually have visibility and transparency to what we're going to get charged before we get charged it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, if folks want to reach out, Damon, and find out more about Dedalus and what's going on there and check out that blog post we mentioned, where can they go?
A couple places, Dedalus.com. Does sound, Dedalus is enunciated just the way you're saying it, Jim. Good job.
Yeah.
Sounds like setting your data loose, which is kind of intentional and fun, but just Google us at Dedalus.com. We'll also be at some events that are coming up pretty quick. The Chime Fall Forum event in San Antonio. Look out for Dedalus there. And we've got the health conference in Vegas coming up the second week of November, and we'll be there as well. So we'll look forward to interacting with folks.
Damon, one thing that's also changed is healthcare related conferences. It used to be there were just maybe one or two big players. Maybe they were general healthcare conferences. Sometimes they'd be specific for oncologists or radiologists. But in the last few years, we've seen the birth of like Health, HLTH, and Vive, and ones that maybe they're still pretty good size, but smaller than the really, really large ones, and are more focused perhaps on, technology, or it's just a different slice of the pie.
Yeah, it's kind of like it kind of feels like when you're at these events, like HIMSS feels a little bit old school, and Health and Vive, which came out of Health and in collaboration with Chime, represents a new forum with a much, much more intentional focus on the consumer experience in care and what that is going to look like in the future, and less focused on the built to bill EMR systems that we run for operations
exactly. And we certainly need both of them. There's no doubt. But this is all part of the shift also. Well, Damon, we're almost totally out of time. To our audience, thanks for joining me on this episode of the Tate Chronicles. I offer a special salute to my guest today, Damon Auer of Dedalus. Damon, thanks for coming aboard today.
Thank you, Jim. It's been fun.
You can find more information on this show's program page at healthcarenowradio.com. Until we meet again, here's wishing you smooth sailing and safe harbors.
Tate Chronicles transmission ending now.